Finance can be messy, but don't worry. Oh,
I'm on the screen still. I thought I was out.
What are you doing there? That's all
I
right.
don't know.
There's my producer. There's Pete.
Hey, everybody. We'll see
you. Oh, finance can be messy, but don't worry. We clean it up with facts, fun, and maybe a little sarcasm. Welcome to the Financial Sandbox. Let's get into it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for regular real talk in the Sandbox. My guest today is Mitchell Ferguson, and Mitchell is an economist. So I really kind of want to get into it because originally, educationally, I studied economics and thought I wanted to go that direction. So today's conversations is about economics in real life, right? My audience lives at the intersection of real estate, financial services, long-term ownership, interest rates, the whole punch bowl of M&Ms, right? And you've seen economics from the inside, from policy to global markets, to how people and business are affected. I want to talk about how we got here, right? Where we are today. What's changed in the economy over the years? What's happening now? And what's it all mean to families, investors, and the future of like home ownership in America?
That's a spectacular question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a big question.
I think number one is the flow of information. The ability to get information off your handheld telephone it's a blessing and it's a curse sometimes.
Sure.
One of the most important things to be successful in any sort of economic endeavor is preparation. You've got to be prepared. Things happen very quickly. Opportunity knocks once, maybe twice. You got to be ready to open the door, and you're ready by knowing what's going on, by knowing what you have, what you want, risks, strengths, opportunities, that sort of thing. It's really important to absorb as much information, maybe about those things that are of interest to you. That's what makes us all different, makes life such a rich mosaic. There's room for everybody in the punch bowl, as you described it. Right. But if you're going to be in the punch bowl, let's learn about what it means to be there. Let's think about how to be successful, and let's always move forward towards that success. So I think the biggest difference between then maybe my parents and my grandparents and what they all did to thrive, survive, depending, and what I've been trying to do, and as I watch my kids now who are older doing their thing, we all are doing it a little bit differently. But it's probably because the information available to us just makes it that much easier to navigate toward a particular place. There's so many things that separated the investor class from the non-investor class, if I can say it that way, just based upon no access to those tools of financial literacy.
Mm-hmm.
Back in, if you were a Dust Bowl farmer, if you were a laundromat owner, whatever the case might be, you might learn from generational knowledge how to be the best in that particular field. But how do you expand your mind? How do you dream and grow? And you find individual entrepreneurs that are able to do that and seize on it, but they were fewer and far between. Nowadays, I think more and more people have access to the tools that allow them to be successful.
Right. So let's start at the beginning. What pulled you into economics?
That's going to be a different answer, I bet, than a lot of economists. So at its very root, it was laziness, because my dad said, "You will go to business school." Okay. So I went to business school, and I hated business school. I figured that out after about a year and a half. My goodness gracious, accounting is dumbing my mind. It's the parameters are, and besides, it's other people's money. I was really having trouble, not with the math or not with the whatever, just with the concepts of constraining the imagination. And at that point in time, it was too late to do anything else and still be on the 4-year plan, other than change to economics. And so I thought, well, all right, I really did enjoy the couple classes I had. I'll do more of that. And so I changed to economics, And then there was a path that branched off, and you could be like an econometric economist, or you could be a storytelling economist, I found. And that was very appealing to me. And so I took a look at history, and I took a look at politics, and sort of created in my discipline there a pathway that served me quite well in my career subsequent. It was all about, how does all this economic stuff, how is it influenced by politics and individual needs and wants and successes and failures, and how does all that policy then sort of portend a success or a failure of the system down the road. And it was such an interesting time to do that, because I graduated in 92.
Mm-hmm.
You had perestroika in the late 80s, you had the New World Order, you had all kinds of stuff happening. I remember in Chico, where I went to school, Chico State, we had a Marxist economist. Every good school had an economist, had a Marxist economist, and they did all those classes. And when the Soviet Union fell, the dude was just moping around the halls. He was very sad and very upset. And
Oh, no.
people would come in and like offer flowers and stuff. It was kind of like a mutual cry session. I wouldn't know, because I never took any of those courses. But eventually the dude reached an epiphany where it's like, Marx was right. It was just the capitalist overextending through bonds and debt. They ruined the experiment. And then after that, he got a swagger back. He was like strutting down the hall again, and it was anyway. So I found the storytelling aspect of economics really compelling. That doesn't mean you can ignore the math, for sure. You've got to understand how all that stuff works out. I joined in state of California. Part of the peace dividend was the Base Closure and Realignment Act of the 90s. That's when many of the military bases around the Bay Area closed, Southern California closed, and we had to find jobs for the civilians. And that was exciting. And then later on, I joined the Foreign Service, and that was that. But yeah, that's how it all started. It all started because I hated managerial accounting. Awesome. I guess I could have answered that way.
Was there a moment when economics stopped being academic and it became personal? I mean, when you realize that explaining how people live, they build and they struggle and they grow, when that became more real for you?
It was always real to me. I'm a storyteller, and you can only be a storyteller if your eyes are open to see the stories in front of you that other people are telling or they're living. And so I just found a home in economics when I realized that I could watch people on the other side of a fishbowl and inform my own life and experience via economic thought and discipline and tools for explaining. Yeah, it didn't change me. It was a home for me.
When you were younger, right? What was it about economics that captured you most? Was it the growth? Was it the opportunity? I mean, you made this change from accounting. But what was it that attracted you to it?
It was actually all the models, the little models that some people were very annoyed in economics class by these models that would say, all other things equal, or nothing else changes, just focus on the interaction, the X graph, between two different things, and focus only on that particular thing. It really helped me put in little bite-sized pieces, sometimes elements of complex problems. And it helps you tune out all the noise. A lot of people say it's worthless. Why would you even do a model like that when everything else is not always equal? You can't, the world is very complex. It's like, yes, that's all true. But one thing at a time. You can't eat an elephant all at once. You've got to start, again, maybe I'm mixing metaphors, but economics helped me really drill down into individual keystone problems that if you focus on and think about, can have a cascading effect on the rest.
Did it ever have a blend or a bent to teach you more about people, about their incentives, the economic incentives? What did it teach you about policy and reality?
Wow, that spectacular questions. My mind jumps to cinema. when you're a little kid, you go to the G-rated screenings and you see Lion King and all that, and then you get to go to a PG movie, and it's a little bit darker and whatnot, and then those R-rated. The more, when I first started, I'm like, it's all milk and honey, and everyone's going to make their own decisions based upon what's best for them, and that's really nice. And then you realize later on, it's like, wow, there's some shady actors out there doing some pretty shady things that who knew about that? And it's like, wait, they're all networked together, and they know each other, and they do these shady things on purpose. There's a whole lot of innocence at the beginning of my career as an economist that was constantly in small and sometimes large pieces shed as I grew in the career, and it just makes me sad. But you know what? That's the human condition. Forever and ever, and for generations and civilizations, there's been you can even explain them through economic tools: winners and losers, bourgeoisie and proletariat, whatever. And it's sad. It's actually tremendously sad. But the first day of Economics 101, they always talk about the Malthusian theorem and the fact that you have carrying capacities, and scarcity is the science, blah, blah, blah. But then the flip side to scarcity is the science is it's pretty sad to be shivering in the dark.
When you compare the economy from when you started to today, what feels most different?
The economy, you like the U.S. economy?
Yeah, sure. Let's use U.S. since we're in the U.S.
It's almost like the U.S. military. It is so immensely powerful that people outside of outside the top 10% have no idea how insanely powerful the U.S. economy is and resilient. But that's just one way to look at the U.S. economy. I mean, if you look at it from the perspective of the person that turns the crank and gets the little shiny coin as an output, you're like, wow, this machine is huge and big and exciting, and look how nice the shiny output is. But if you look at it from the perspective of a cog, you're like, man, I'm just spinning around here, doing my thing like generations of cogs before me. There's so many different ways to look at it, but it's interesting, the question, the way I automatically chose to look at it from a macro standpoint is via immense power that the economy currently possesses, especially vis-a-vis the rest of the world. Not even
that's where I was just going to go. And when you ask that same question to a full worldwide economy, what do you, in your years, what do you see has really changed?
Yeah. It's interesting how my mind is switching, what's the word? Lenses as you ask these questions. The most important thing that's happened over the last few decades of the world economy is a rising out of poverty through billions of people. In fact,
sure.
Tremendous. I think looking at the world economy, one can't focus on the shiny output. You have to focus on the general health of the cogs inside. And I'm talking about Africa. I'm talking about India. I'm talking about even China. Latin America, if you go back to the 70s and we were in the highly indebted poor country mode, where the IMF and World Bank were rescuing countries from the ashes of their own self-immolation, it was a mess. And
sure.
They were designed for disaster. So we're not there anymore, right? HIPAA no longer really an issue. One can talk about how that all happened. But now we're talking about poverty alleviation. I think we've got a pretty good story worldwide to tell.
Have we changed more because of debt or globalization, or is it demographics? Is it technology?
We the world or we the U.S.?
We the world.
Different answers for each one.
Yeah, it is. But you were going into some of the smaller countries and their growth and our growth. So when you do that comparison, is it government intervention, right? What is it that has created the change most that you've seen?
It's old me when I was doing trade deals and stuff would have focused on the Washington Consensus, and the Washington Consensus was kind of the natural, like the globalist view of life after Bretton Woods, life after all the IMF stuff. It was sort of saying, okay, HIPAA and all that other nonsense wasn't working out for everybody, so let's let the countries trade out of poverty. Let's let them have access to the U.S. marketplace, and let's really drop tariffs. Let's let them get in here. People used that as a tool to reduce migration flows. It was actually fairly successful. And one of the most important things, Entrepreneurship to me is the key to, it's a great liberator worldwide. And it's also true of the US, but it's true in a different scope. For the rest of the world, generally, I'm going to maybe carve out a little bit of Europe, but for the rest of the world, especially the developing world, entrepreneurs are so important. And that statement sounds like it should just be common sense. But if you've ever been to Africa or Latin America or these other places and spent some quality time there, you realize that people don't realize they can be entrepreneurs and they can be successful. They've been
Yeah.
told for years that their ideas don't count. And
Yeah,
that's
when I did my master's, I studied in Uganda and Rwanda. And one of the things we looked at was microfinancing. And it's amazing how a small amount of what we consider $300 as a small amount of money in the US can really create a burgeoning business on the continent in Africa.
for sure. And the access to capital allows people to believe in their ideas. There was a ad in some Latin American magazine at once, and I remember I ripped it off and I put it in my office and I carried it around the world for a while. But it said, "Good ideas will always have good banks." And it should just had a little flower pot and a little flower.
Yeah.
And the idea was trust in yourself. Your good idea and your confidence in your ability to execute on that idea and that vision will get you financing. Now, what you're talking about is access to financing for people that maybe need help to get to that point. And we talked about what was the thing where people could take their sewing machines and offer it as collateral. There was like a way to collateralize simple possessions that people had. Maybe you don't have the deed to a piece of property, but you got a sewing machine, and that's the most important thing to you.
Right.
The other issue about that, which I'm sure you saw, is counterintuitively to folks that don't speak the economic language, that type of capital is very expensive, right? I bet you were talking about 25-30% loans.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh my gosh, you people are terrible. It's like, well, what other loan are they going to get?
Right. Yeah. So if you sort of looked at the economic challenges that we're living with today, what do most people underestimate?
Government involvement can be very helpful or very destructive. I was thinking about the 1031 exchanges and stuff today, and I was thinking about the very concept behind their creation, which is not taxing unrealized capital gains. So this is maybe a weird way to approach the answer, but if someday government decides that that's a crummy idea and we should tax people's wealth as it theoretically increases without a transaction occurring, well, you know what? Your world just changed. And and so I worry about that. I think that's a big threat. I think the other thing people need to think more about is time in general. Time passes so quickly, and it can be requirements for different things in a tax year, or it could be you've only got so many years to work. And I think people don't appreciate time. And then finally, access to information and how best to use it.
If you had to diagnose the current environment, are we dealing primarily with a debt problem, a growth problem, an affordability problem, or a confidence problem? I mean, I've created problems
in the US.
Yeah.
We are dealing with, okay, so those things that people are like, oh, let's go in the Wayback Machine and check out some stuff from the past. Yeah, we need to get in our Way Up Machine and go way in the future and think about the 2 paragraphs in the history book that'll be describing this particular time, economically speaking. And I think that there are going to be 2 things that describe this period of time, this 5-10 year period. It's going to be COVID, and it's going to be AI. Now, I'm going to make some assumptions about AI. I'm going to actually assume that the people that are making giant investments in data centers and all this other stuff are going to be fairly successful in prosecuting their vision for an AI versus enterprise future. Let's just say that's the case. If that's the case, what did COVID and the AI boom in our Way Up Machine, what's it going to look like back here? It's going to look like office space vacancies down. It's going to look like conversions of office space non-existent. And what happens if your central business district no longer has people that go there, drive past? It's going to be a huge. That's the problem. I view the immense challenge of AI, and it's too early for us to blame ourselves for not doing anything about it. But this is all this AI stuff, and Turner and I have talked about this on his show before. We're seeing like the Wright brothers airplane of AI kind of like bobbing around Kitty Hawk. We haven't seen the transcontinental jets yet and the supersonic Concords that are going to come in our near future. And when that happens, you probably remember a typing pool. Remember, I had a typing pool when I first started off, where I would write something down in a note and I'd put it in a box, and a nice lady would come by my box and pick it up and then type it and then put it back in. And yeah, so they don't have typing pools anymore. Something like that's going to happen.
So you brought up 1031 exchange. So we're going to get into my world, where I live in the real estate environment. A lot of my long-term owners, clients, are long-term owners of real estate. They've built wealth over decades, and now they're tired of the active management. They're tired of the maintenance. They're tired of the tenants, the complexity. What does this economy mean for them?
Oh, well, again, it goes back partially to the COVID thing. Interest rates are a huge problem. Rates are a huge problem. What's going on in the Middle East right now is just a blip. It's not gonna. It's gonna have long-term downward, in my opinion, long-term downward pressure on all kinds of good things. But we have to get across the hump to get there. So I just assume it away. But interest rates sticky up as they currently are a problem, compounded by the fact, like, for example, again, back to COVID. COVID was terrible. I'm sorry everyone got sick, and I'm sorry about everything that happened. But by gosh, I made some wonderful financial moves during that time, right? I refinanced my house and all the different things. Now that I'm refinanced into, like, I think it's 3.25 or whatever it is, I've got those handcuffs, baby. I'm not going anywhere. And
exactly. Yeah.
When you've got that going on, and when you've got the high interest rates, you've got a marketplace that's it's like those dirt roads with potholes. It's very bumpy, and I don't know if I'm going to get there or not. So if people want to get out of the marketplace of that particular thing they're doing, I do believe there's 1031 opportunities out. It doesn't have to be an apartment place, right? It can be a piece of land, or it can be something. It doesn't have to be a hotel or whatever. You can be creative about it. But as you know, you've got to be prepared. You can't, 45 days is the blink of an eye, right? And you can't sell your equities, you can't sell your property and then look around. Too late.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's my world, right? I work in the alternative space, a lot of Delaware statutory trust options for those clients. You talk about that handcuff of that low rate. What do you think owners make, the mistakes that owners make when they wait too long to plan their transition?
Why would people move out of an asset at that low rate?
Or ownership of investment property that has
for sure. I mean, but you need to get the flow of properties available for people to move. Well, I'm assuming they want to move into something different. I mean, if they want to create an annuity and then just be done with things, they're gonna have to pay some tax. So there's an easy out, but it's expensive. If you want to do something different, then I think you need to find creative ways to bring partners on board that can perpetuate the long-term investment in different ways that allow you to kind of slide on out.
Right.
But it doesn't happen instantly. So you've got to plan well in advance. That would be my advice. That's my advice. If in this particular economy at this particular point in time, because assets are so randomly available, right? I think that's what the low COVID interest rate handcuff. It's very rare that it's not like they're just like, oh, I'm going to sell my house. You can't sell your house. Yeah. Because you could, but you shouldn't sell your house because your rate is so low that whatever. So that just means properties are randomly available where they otherwise wouldn't be. And then we got the commercial thing I just talked about, right? With the AI and stuff. People are going to be in a huge bind commercially. Did you see what happened with UBS today? They had a relatively $450 million account that they just put a cap on. Sorry, everyone that invested in this real estate account, in this real estate fund, no more withdrawing for 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Because we're getting too many people, right? That's no good. And that's the canary in a coal mine. You've got to, as an investor, watch out for that sort of thing. And they're saying, oh, it's because of the Middle East, but that's not it. It's because of vacancies and conversion rates post-COVID, when people probably took advantage of those low interest rates to make another office building. They thought people would come back to work. In the buildings.
Yeah. And we're finding that. I'm in the San Francisco market, so we're seeing the trades of buildings at fractions of what they sold for pre-COVID and during COVID, and so that's creating some downward pressure. I want to transition into kind of, we're seeing the greatest transition of wealth right now in history, right? Baby boomers are transitioning a lot of wealth, but a lot of it is tied up in real estate. What do you think that the baby boom generation, or even Gen Xers, what are they missing when they start thinking about what the next generation wants, millennials and Gen Z?
Well, that's, if you could bottle the answer to that question, you could sell it pretty pretty well.
No, I prepared for my interview with you, you know.
There you go. I love it. I think you have to look at how those boomers got their assets, and then how those assets began to appreciate. And then consider whether or not the economy offers the same basic sort of paradigms that everyone operated under. Okay, let me explain. So the classic boomer story is, grandparents come back, greatest generation, World War II, recovering from all these things. The U.S. is a great blah, blah, blah. They worked really hard. And they didn't go out to eat, and they had deferred, what's that word? Deferred satisfaction. They deferred satisfaction so that their generation subsequent could do well. And you know what? It really worked. But they worked. That's just like 4 or 5 words on a piece of paper. But to actually remember what it was like to eat macaroni and cheese dinners in a very small kitchen, that was how that was. And my kids, and 1 too many days a month of macaroni and cheese dinner would have been discussed. So the question is, can subsequent generations, do they feel the need to have this deferred satisfaction in furtherance of a generational accumulation of wealth? That may be a valid question if the paradigm of the boomers continues, which I'm not sure it does. I'm not sure that today's economy necessarily needs deferred satisfaction. I think everybody can maybe get a piece of the pie. Perhaps the pie is smaller. Why? Interest rates are so much cheaper now, right? Back in the 70s, I complain every day about interest rates, but interest rates are not 15, 17%.
Yeah.
And they were when my parents were buying things and stuff. And if you have that sort of interest rate, no wonder there was deferred satisfaction. Okay, but it's not that now. So you actually could buy a car, you can buy a house, around the margins, the margins shrink and so forth. But generally, people can do this, and the question is, will those assets continue to appreciate at the highly accelerated level that they did for the boomer folks? So you look no farther than Bay Area or Southern California, and you see those people that scrimped and saved to buy a $20,000 1 bathroom house in Southern California, and now they have like $1 million house where 3 generations live, and they can tap into that, sell it, something, where the case might be. But then what's going to happen to those cats, the kids or the grandkids that get that asset? Let's say it's liquidated, they have the money now. What are they going to do? I don't know. It's a different. I'm not sure that they're so focused on like their grandkids. Maybe, I don't know.
Do you think it's a blessing, or is there a lot of complexity instead?
I think there's a tremendous amount of complexity. I started seeing it when I was in Placer County in California back in the 80s and 90s. We started seeing kids in my high school first one, then two, and then several. Their parents had retired out of the Bay Area and sold their house to buy a ranch in Lincoln, and so now their kids were coming to our school, and it's
Yeah.
like they lived in a tiny little, what do you call it, townhouse thing, in wherever it was, and now they've got a giant ranch. And I'm like, wow, huh? Which is weird if you're starting out, at a different basis point. I think it's a blessing that more people have access to capital. I think it requires a certain amount of discipline, self-discipline, and economic fluency to not make huge mistakes.
Right. Exactly. So how do you think, what do you think about that generational transition? I mean, when is it appreciated? When is that time to make that transition? Do you, as an economist looking at families, when should families actually start thinking about that transition?
You've got to know what you want, right? So you need to have a pretty good idea of how much money you're going to need to generate to have the retirement that you want. If you're talking about retirement, maybe we're talking about second opportunity. Then you use a portfolio to fuel that until it catches on. But let's just say you want to retire. You need to think about where you're going to live, how that's going to look like. Are you going, what sort of disposable income do you want? You want to travel? One of the things I think an awful lot now, because I'm kind of going through it myself, it's like, my gosh, I retired from federal government a number of years ago, and so we have a pension. It's nice, it's different. But I've also been blowing through cash on things like trips, and I wondered about whether or not that was smart. And I kind of decided that it's justified. Why? Because I can move around, and not everything hurts, and I can go places. Eventually, as we live longer, we get up there in years, it gets harder and harder to go farther away. And so I think you need to good advice from me would be to front load some portfolio flexibility to do those things that you might have more trouble doing later in life.
Oh, you're such a Gen Zer. We sort of are living in a little bit of a theoretical uncertain time right now. And I guess, do families begin to value durability, cash flow, stability, and simplicity more than upside? What do you think?
They probably should have valued all those things when they were 20 and should have continued moving forward, but it never happens.
No.
Why does it never happen? Because here in the US, and he or she shows up in unexpected times and places, in the middle of the night, in the middle of coffee in the morning, during the commute to work. It's that little, those little angels and devils. It's like the opportunity one. I don't know what that is, but it's like an opportunity one. And it's like, what you could do with that. Or, what you should be really looking for is, or I bet they haven't. And sometimes just like, go away. Or sometimes like, yeah. And that sort of curiosity, that sort of drive, and it gets the motor running and all that sort of thing. That's what makes America different. That's why our machine is so powerful, because we believe that if we listen to that thing sometimes, and that thing shows up, and we listen to it, wonderful, beautiful things happen. But sometimes they don't, right? And you've got to be able, as you get older, to minimize those risks, because I don't know if you know anybody or have seen anybody that actually is working when they're 70 something with no social safety net. I know some folks from other countries that have made it here, and they don't have 40 quarters, and they don't have much of a family set up to help them. And they really don't know what's going to happen to them when they can no longer physically work. And
Right.
I don't know what's going to happen to them, right? I mean, that's rough. So there can be bad things that occur that you want to avoid, that you must plan for.
So Gen Z, I mentioned them. They seem to be less interested in home ownership. that experience is the bigger priority. Do you think they want something different? I mean, a lot of them look back and they saw as their parents struggled through 2008, 9, 10, 11, the GFC, and or have they inherited a market that simply makes ownership feel like out of reach?
Okay, I'll go on the sort of thin ice thing, and you can pull me back at any time. I don't want to get political, but this is going to sort of lean into it a little bit. Back in the 60s, counterculture and that sort of thing, and there were lots of civil rights things going on that are exempt from this analysis. I'm just talking about the people that wanted to be anarchists. You know, the hippie guy, all that sort of thing. They were interesting. They posed no real threat. They didn't have money. I think the Gen Z folks, and we can talk about what fuels them, if it's not guilt for what they have versus what others do not have, whether or not it's a real trying to right a certain long-term systemic social injustice. I don't know, but those folks are actually well-funded and capable of bending their view of a social arc toward a different way, in a way that the baby boomers hadn't. You know, you better wear your IBM suit and, you know, show up to work, you know, all the stuff, or you're going to fail. I think the people nowadays are out there bending arcs and being successful at it. And that may be more satisfying intrinsically to them than getting all the fancy little tokens at the end of the life game. You know what I mean?
Right.
I kind of wonder about that.
It's 2026. If you were talking to a 28-year-old today, how would you help them think about renting versus owning?
Owning property is generational wealth. Owning property means you're leaving something to the people that come after you. My dad and mom didn't teach me that was a good thing to do. I feel that it's the right thing to do. So I think I would have to have, you know, it's sometimes renting versus owning, depending on where you live, the economic sense leans mildly one way or another, and so that's fine. But then there's that always finger on the scale that says the generational wealth benefit outweighs all this other stuff, and so you probably should do it. And real estate continues to be one of the best investments you can make, in the long term. So no question. If I'm talking to a young person now, I need to sort of gauge, and it goes back to the prior answer. I need to gauge what's important to them, because what's important to them individually, and then maybe if I ask enough of them to the group, is not that generational thing. It's other stuff. And that's cool. That just means that we as a country are changing.
What concerns you most about the economic future of our younger generations?
I worry that, just like I'm sure every other parent is worried for every other generation, even back into the Sparta days, I think that the romantic vision of all this arc bending is untempered at times by reality. And I worry too much that by the time people realize that, eating all the rich might seem satisfying immediately, later on in the evening, there's nobody left to, offer you a bed or whatever. I worry that too much idealism is going to temper focus on the very hard work of grinding something out that ultimately has proven to be the keys to economic success in the United States. No such thing as a free lunch.
No, I want to transition to bond markets, mortgage rates, and how the machine works. I think there's a lot of confusion, and people get confused because this affects everyone in real estate. For someone who listens to Fed moves rates and assumes mortgage rates move in lockstep, explain the difference between short-term rates and long-term rates.
Yeah, I mean, the shortest term rate is the overnight bank rate, right? And that's the one the Fed moves up and down, the absolute prime rate. And you look at credit cards, look at other stuff, and it's like prime rate plus whatever their little take on things, and that's all pretty straightforward, and that's fine. But if you look at the day-to-day bond movements on the CNBC ticker, you'll see the 2-year, the 10-year, and eventually like the 30-year. And why are they all so different? And the 10-year one is, what generally are things going to look like from an inflationary standpoint? I mean, inflation is the most important factor, vis-a-vis interest rates. You jack interest rates up to keep the inflation down. And so if you're anticipating throughout a market high inflation persistently, and that happens for a bunch of reasons. But anyway, if you have high inflation, generally you're going to have to attack it with higher interest rates. And the 2-year now is being affected. We were getting close to having it below 4, and that was, I like to see that 2-year below 4. It makes me happy. That's good. But then with this Iran thing, bam, it's now back almost up to 4.3, 4.4, 4.5. That's all temporary, right? And that's noise in the machine. So for investors that are looking at long-term real estate investment, you need to look at that 10-year, and that's why you're locking into like for homeowners, a good 30-year investment. I wonder if that's not going to change in the future. We've seen some talk about a 40-year mortgage. That didn't go anywhere. I can see in the future, if AI brings a universal basic income, that there may even be down the road a universal mortgage allowance, which would be for well-qualified buyers, a transferable mortgage across investments during a lifetime of a consumer, right? That would get you into that starter home at a certain mortgage rate. That would allow you to continue it into your next home. Wouldn't that be grand? And if you're, I kind of hope that in the future that would happen, because it would release these handcuffs. It would do all kinds of different things.
That
can't do it for corporate investors, but
that gets right to my next question that I had for you, which is, why are mortgage rates not simply set by the Fed?
Oh, well, we do like a little bit of corporate involvement. So the mortgage rates are the more people, that goes back to my prior answer, the more people look at mortgage rates, the more angry they're going to eventually be, because the whole concept of a credit reporting agency is relatively new. I think those guys only came online, maybe 15, 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago. They weren't always a thing. And so now you've got the private sector evaluating your credit worthiness based upon what? And, the private, if you had the, well, I mean, it kind of goes in counter to what I eventually foresee happening with this universal basic mortgage thing. You don't really want, I guess you want to have the private sector operate the mortgage market so that it can more easily react to different things. But we've seen it consolidate. So I'll have to think more about that.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah, I'll have to think more about that. That's interesting. I tend to, I'm not a huge fan of the government doing everything for us, but I'm also not a huge fan of maybe only 2 banks doing everything for us. And I think we probably have 2 or 3 only doing it now. That's an oligopoly. That's a problem.
So what do you think actually drives mortgage rates? Is it the Fed? Is it the bond market? Is it inflation expectations? Is it mortgage-backed securities? Or is it some of all of the above?
Some of all the above. There was a short story I read that probably I could have answered one of your first questions about. I was in an English class, and it was called A Tale of Wheat. And it was a little, I forget who wrote it. It was little chunks of a wheat farmer, a deal in wheat, it was called. A wheat farmer producing wheat and sold it at a certain price. The bread company buys the wheat at a certain price and then makes its bread and stuff. Anyway, it was all manipulated by unseen forces, unseen to all those different players, that resulted in bread costing too much and the collapse of the wheat market. I think mortgage rates are affected by a number of things. I would say mainly as a baseline, the Fed rate, but also a general risk and assessment. Because, what do you call these things? Derivatives, right? A bank gives you a mortgage and then almost immediately packages it up and sells it to another company. Yeah. And they don't sell just the good ones, right? They sell just enough of the good ones to get the bad ones off their books. So all of that actually affects your mortgage rate. bankers that are crotchety about the administration and power and very angry that they're doing certain things affect the mortgage rate. This is, I think, well, it's probably the same back in the day, right? But I think the big oligarchs and huge money, one way or another, can push and pull all kinds of different levers, and we're just leaves on the stream, man. We float around.
I've always wondered, it's always been in the back of my head, why can't mortgage rates just float more independently based on housing demand and affordability and the long-term importance of home ownership? I mean, why do they have to be tied into the broader bond market and the cost of capital?
Yeah, it's kind of like if you have, I don't know, that's a super question, but the price of your input is the Fed funds rate, right? So if you're a big bank, and how are mortgage banks successful? How do they differentiate amongst themselves? Everyone gets money at the same general rate, right? It's a commodity, basically. You get your commodity, but you have the best deal with the credit reporting agencies. You've trained your underwriters the best to sniff out fraud. You've got, compared to this bank over here, you've got 0.02%, better default rate. That's how those guys compete and so forth. So I don't know. I mean, I think the government probably likes them competing like that. It makes it hard for people to get mortgages, right? We had the global financial crisis that you mentioned. I remember a friend of mine is like, a friend of my brother's actually, because he wouldn't have been a friend of mine, I would have had his ear. He's like, wow, we just bought this house and prices are going up so much. My accountant said we should get another house and just do an interest-only loan. And then by the time our current house appreciates enough, we can readjust. And I'm like, ooh. And of course, that didn't happen. And so they lost both their houses. Right. So, well, they should have known. That was easy. That was an easy one. So right. The market punishes. And as a result, from GFC forward, I think you've had a much tougher screen. We're only now forgetting about that, right? We're only now forgetting about it. And now we're using the derivative market to shield creditors from, they're doing it again. They may want to do it again. I don't know.
Well, I hope my audience is as much a nerd as I am, because I love this conversation, right? So what makes the spread between Treasury yields and mortgage rates?
The spread between, so I would assume that mortgage rates should have a higher yield because, and we can talk about it if they don't, but my assumption, just without seeing the numbers, the United States is forever, and so they'll always be good on their bonds. They're not going to default on the bonds. Joe Yo might very well not pay mortgage next week and then go into default. So there's a risk there. You can have the tightest credit screens, you can have the best credit reporting, but you're going to have circumstances dictate a certain number of at-risk mortgages that would go south that you can't easily unload, and that's going to create the spread. There's more risk in the mortgage market, although there's not as much risk in the mortgage market as there is in, I don't know what, the personal loan market, right? You want to send a signature loan for 12 or 14%.
Yeah. So you went ahead and mentioned the bond market. So often the bond market is quite different. And what does the bond market understand before the public does? What do they see?
Okay, so when you say bond market, we have to differentiate between the U.S. Treasury auction market and the general market for municipal and other bonds. Right. It's much more interesting to focus on the latter because there's a whole range of different sorts of bonds. But if we're focusing just on the federal bonds thing, ask your question again. I got to.
What is the bond? What do they usually see before the public?
Oh, yeah.
Is clued in.
Yeah. They're sort of a canary in the coal mine thing. They take a look at the international ability or appetite to consume U.S. bonds. And so you look at people that are doing that, or you look at companies that, China is the main thing, right? So you have China and they make all our toys, all this stuff. And what do they get paid in? They get paid in dollars. What are you gonna do with all that? So one of the things they do with all that is they buy bonds. Now, this is true of every country that does business with the U.S. Remember, we talked a little bit ago about that shiny big machine that creates cool-looking coins? That's the U.S. market. Anyone that does business with us, almost everyone, and this is talking before second Trump, ran a huge surplus with us. We would just buy. They would sell stuff, and they had all this currency. What are you gonna do with it? So they would buy the bonds, or they would speculate into different things. If they stopped buying bonds, that's a problem. And what's going on there? And you would see that immediately reflected in the treasury rate, right? Another way that you look at it is an inflation. If people are seeing markets come in hot, or certain markets that come in with hot inflation numbers are going to ripple throughout an economy, and smart investors are going to see that and realize it's going to cause the need for the Fed to take action. So there's always these really smart people doing all that math stuff, looking at things like oil or property or labor costs. It used to be UAW, right? It used to be, is the UAW going to get a new contract, and that was going to affect everything downstream. Their unions are smaller and smaller pieces of all that now.
Right. My next interview with you is going to get more into investor stuff, but I've got a couple of rapid fire. One word for the economy, right now.
Hot.
Wow.
No place I'd rather be. No place I'd rather be than the U.S. economy. We're on the cusp. Well, anyway, that's not one. What's that?
Bigger risk today: inflation, recession, or policy mistake?
Inflation. Inflation kills. It's the worst.
Yeah. More important signal today when you look at it: is it jobs, inflation, or the bond market?
Jobs.
I agree with you there. All right,
Jobs.
So I've in my research for you, I didn't find a whole lot of personal material, right?
Good. No.
So you've lived and worked in a lot of fascinating places, though. Which posting had the best food, and the best stories, since you're a storyteller?
The best food, goodness gracious. Mexico had the best food, and I, before I joined the Foreign Service, I had never left the U.S. and I had no idea what was out there. And every time I showed up in one of these other countries, I was just like a kid, wide-eyed, walking the streets, and it was just like the coolest thing. And I had no idea, Hollywood South was so powerful. Mexico has a tremendous legacy and history of Las Bellas Artes, and film and all this stuff. It blew my mind. Loved it.
You're a fluent Spanish speaker. My parents and family came here from Honduras in Central America. Was there ever a moment when language unlocked a breakthrough that would never have happened otherwise for you?
Yeah, it's more than language, but it's because of language. When I was doing supporting a free trade agreement between Colombia and the US, I spent a lot of time with the Colombians. And when you spend a lot of time with the official Colombians, you drink a lot and you eat a lot, and it's really late nights, and you can't do that in English, I'll tell you. And so we were talking about sugar, and again, the world's changed. But back in free trade agreement days, the very last thing we would offer to a country before we signed the free trade agreement was what the effect on the U.S. sugar quota was going to be for their country. U.S. sugar quota is a show that we could talk about. It's just an amazing topic. Right. And I'd talked about this over many aguardientes with all the Colombians, and they're like, "Oh, I really hope we can get so many thousand tons additional on sugar." And I'm like, yeah, good luck with that, blah, blah, blah. And so this is maybe a year prior to what I'm going to tell you right now. We had just almost finished the free trade agreement, and we were at USTR in the smallest room possible with the chief agriculture negotiator of the U.S., just the U.S. delegation, and they were reviewing the final offer. And they got to the sugar thing, and they're like, "Man, we're going to offer them 50,000 tons, but I don't think that's going to be enough. We're going to have to go back to the president, and he'll have to talk to the so-and-so. And I was just a fly on the wall, a U.S. diplomat there. And I raised my hand, and they're like, yeah, Mitch, what? I'm like, I tell you what, if you come in with this number, they're going to fall off their chair because they thought they're only going to get 30,000 tons. If you offer them 50,000 tons, they will think the greatest thing that ever happened just occurred. And they're like, are you sure about that? I'm like, guaranteed, guaranteed. And so they're like, all right. And they took my word for it. We go back into the official, it's almost like buying a car. They write down what the sugar offer is going to be and hand it over to the Colombians. And so they did it. And you could tell, they almost literally fell out of their chairs.
Wow.
And they're like, whoa, well, I don't know. We'll have to get back to you. And then like it left. They weren't getting back to us. They were out there just like celebrating and stuff. So yes, I felt that was maybe a pinnacle of achievement based upon language and liver in the service of your country.
Well, and you're working in economics and diplomacy at the same time, and trade, right? Which one sounds the most boring at a dinner party? Between diplomacy, trade, and economics, which one sounds most boring at the dinner party, but actually is the most dramatic behind closed doors?
Ooh, I would say diplomacy, because almost all the most important diplomacy stuff I've ever done has been with my own people, right? Like the example of the sugar thing I just gave. Yeah. I had to convince the administration people and the other experts that had been doing this for years and years and years that I had heard right and could trust what they heard. Right. And I could only do that because I trusted those guys, because I knew that all happens. But that's kind of, I think for the dinner party, so it's critical, but it's boring. The economic stuff was just fascinating. I remember a conversation in El Salvador where we were talking about why El Salvadoran agriculture hadn't benefited from CAFTA. And one of the people that we invited to lunch, and this is the diplomacy part, inviting those people to lunch and knowing who to invite is so important, because you'll never have the good conversations unless you invite the right person. Okay, so carrot farmer guy that I invited tells our ambassador, Walmart comes in and wants carrots to be a certain size. In the US, carrots are always a certain size. If you go overseas, carrots are all kinds of things.
They're huge.
Anyway, so this guy from El Salvador says, finally, I made a US carrot, and I showed it to the Walmart guy, and he's like, wow, this is great. Okay, we'll sign you up. I need 4 containers a quarter of those carrots. And the guy's like, 4 containers of carrots like that a quarter? He says, I can't even fill 1 container like that a year. You guys are kidding. So the economies of scale were a problem. But I just love those conversations. It was great.
Right.
And I felt very happy, because it's like you're a dad. You're like, I brought the carrot farmer, and look how cool that was.
You're an Eagle Scout.
I am.
What part of that mindset still shows up in your work today? Is it preparedness, calm, service, leadership, or just surviving bad coffee?
When I talk about the Eagle Scout rank, and it's something that's always been on every single resume that I've ever circulated. I put it there because I like to talk about how I accomplished the highest goal I could achieve in an organization that required difficult steps, creativity, and leadership. Mm-hmm. And so I just found that it was something I like to talk about. Getting a job in the Foreign Service is rough. You don't just get into the Foreign Service and off you go. Every 2 years, you're applying for a new position. You want to work in an embassy, whatever, you've got to get hired. And so it really sharpened the saw. And I always told the people that work for me, you got to start day one deciding what that story is you're going to tell about yourself and about your experiences and how it applies to what you want to do next. And so I found that the Eagle Scout thing was always a nice, because it's like, wow, you accomplished something cool, and then it was hard to do it.
So you've had serious work, right? The economics, the diplomacy. What still makes you laugh in a professional setting?
Well, now I need to not laugh as much, because it's always the young person that comes in and thinks they know what's going on. And I laugh because I was that person, I remember. and it's like, oh boy, just wait. And that's, you got a journey ahead of yourself. And I mean, how cool is the journey, right? I mean, I wouldn't want to. They always say, what would you tell yourself? Like, if you can go back in time and talk to your 18-year-old self, what, don't go out with so-and-so, certainly. But if you're talking about professionally, I don't know, man. I mean, I learned from all the successes and I learned from all the setbacks. So I see people that come in 20 years old and like uber confident. Okay, there is an exception. There is an exception, and you've probably seen this too. There's some people that are just from day one well put together and have got it. I don't even know how that happens, but those people do exist, and I don't laugh at those people. I don't chuckle internally at those people. I just wait to see where I'm going to find them next going up.
So my life revolves around cartoons. Always. There's always a cartoon character somewhere. If today's economy were a cartoon character, who would it be and why?
I mean, my mind instantly goes to Superman. I'm an optimist. And again, I've seen the US economy. The way I look at the US economy is relative to all the other economies. There is no economy on earth by far that I'd rather be a part of than the US economy. So yes, it's Superman. And sometimes Superman, how many pieces of kryptonite fell on the earth? Because the guy gets all hangdogged when he's got the kryptonite around his neck, and that happens to us sometimes too. But someone's going to help, or we're going to figure it out, and the kryptonite's going to get tossed around, and then whoever did that, whatever. I just have great optimism about the U.S. economy.
All right, so here are my cartoon questions, my last ones.
Okay.
Is the stock market more Bugs Bunny, Wile E. Coyote, or Daffy Duck right now?
Always Daffy Duck. I would probably suggest that it's the whole Looney Tunes show. It's a cat. What do you call those things? Those casts that an ensemble cast. It's an ensemble cast. Yeah. So it's very diverse, and you're always going to have one singer that just hits that perfect note, and then everyone else locks in. Or you're going to have Daffy Duck with his little screwball flag making a mess.
You mentioned inflation earlier as a concern. If inflation had a cartoon voice, what would it be?
That dastardly dude from the lady in The Great Race. What was Dirk Dastardly or whatever it is?
Yeah.
Man, I do not like inflation. Inflation is terrible.
All right, last question. If you had to explain treasury yields, which is torturous, right? Yeah. Using a Pixar character, who gets the job?
Buzz Lightyear. You got to sell those things, dog.
Really? Oh, great.
Treasury yields are as far as you can see.
All right. And if there's a cartoon character that you relate to as Mitchell Ferguson, the economist, the diplomat, who is it?
That's just embarrassing. Danger Mouse.
Why?
Come along, Penfold. I don't know. It's all about confidence. It's all about confidence. And that's because, this is the first one that came to mind. For your investors, confidence is so important. I mean, access to information is great, but if you just sit there and ready, aim, and never have the confidence to fire, then you're not going to benefit from any of the opportunities available to you.
Right. Well, folks, that's a wrap. This has been amazing. This was really fun. Don't forget to
enjoyed it.
Subscribe, and stay tuned for more raw, real financial talk in the sandbox. Mitchell, I've really enjoyed this. Thanks a lot for joining me on the show.
Thanks for having me on.